Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're all doing well. You don't need to see me, do you? Not that you can hardly see me anyway. I'm just tiny in the corner there. You don't need to see me. All right, happy Monday to everybody. Should have done this Saturday, the day after, trial recap kind of thing. But I've had a lazy weekend, so there's that. But I'm back to do the recap of day 13 of the Karen Reid retrial. So it was all about Alan Jackson. It was like one of those episodes of EastEnders. And I haven't watched EastEnders for years. And for those who've no idea what EastEnders is, it's a soap opera. It's a long-running soap opera that I remember watching it when I was a teenager. That's how long it's been going. And the best episodes of EastEnders, I always thought, were it was just two people in really intense conversation. They were always the shows that had me on the edge of my seat. But like I said, I haven't watched EastEnders for years, so I have no idea what's going on. But it reminded me of that, one of those really intense episodes. Alan Jackson, absolute masterclass in defense. I was that guy, honestly, he's a beast. And Sergeant Buchanan from the Massachusetts State Police. What an absolute dummy. What a dummy. Alan Jackson, in my opinion, ran rings round him. But they've been able to get in some of the stuff that perhaps Hank Brennan, special prosecutor, did not want to go. He did not want to go there. So what Alan Jackson's been able to do is get in all of the texts between Karen Reid and Brian Higgins. Now, in trial 1, Brian Higgins himself had the special task of reading all of the texts that took place within 2 weeks before John O'Keefe died. And this was a bunch of flirting, very childish, honestly, like on both of their parts. It reminded me of what it must be like as a teenager these days. When I was a teenager, we didn't have phones, we didn't have texting, but it's like two teenagers. Are you interested in me? And oh dear me. And how insecure is Brian Higgins? Very insecure. And Karen was mad with John. I think she just wanted some attention from someone else. She wanted to feel attractive to someone else. I don't think she would ever have really gone there with Brian Higgins. Who would? Honestly, who would? But because Higgins hadn't been called, and it's possible that Hank Brennan isn't going to call Brian Higgins or Brian Albert, his argument would be, why would he need to? So Alan Jackson, absolute masterclass in defense, has got all of those texts in through Buchanan, and he's been able to do that because Brian Higgins was reprimanded for what he did, but he extracted from his own phone, like he went to the FBI office and extracted his text with Karen Reid and his text with John O'Keefe and gave them to Sergeant Buchanan. So because he'd given them to Buchanan, Buchanan was able to bring them into evidence. So Hank Brennan, he couldn't get a word in edgeways apart from the occasional objection. Well, quite a few objections, honestly, but it was Alan Jackson versus Buchanan for the entire day. And they have not finished. He's coming back today as Buchanan because they've got to finish the cross. Then there's going to be a redirect. Then there's going to be a recross. So Buchanan is in the hot seat for a while yet. A while yet. Yeah, he's gross. He thinks he's outsmarting the defense. He just looks like a petulant toddler when he's refusing to answer or being really slimy and shady. Like, all of these people are shady. Anyway, what we're going to do is play some clips, and I'm not going to dwell too much on the testimony before the text messages, but don't worry, I'm not going to be playing the actual text messages, because if you saw them on Friday and you saw them last year and you heard them all read, I'm sure you don't need me to go through them. But if you haven't and you've missed the day, then the link to day 13 is in the description box. Now, there's a bunch of channels who've played them. I just use Court TV for the ease of it all. So there's that. But good morning, everyone. Good evening, whatever. I'm not going to say hellos. I'm going to get straight into this. All right. So I'm just going to play just a little bit from the morning. And this was the tail light pieces. So Buchanan went out there as the snow was receding. It was like a flaming ice age by the sounds, like the way that Buchanan makes it sound. You know, it's like the melting of the ice caps in the Arctic. I mean, look, I know there was snowdrifts. I know it came down heavy, like during the morning of the 29th. I know it did. And then with the plows, like they pile it up. We don't get snow like that here in the UK. Like, I've never seen really, really deep snow. Maybe a couple of times it's been deep, but nothing like this. We don't have a lot of snow here in the UK, so I'm sure I don't appreciate what it's like to live through a blizzard. But anyhow, this is just one example of how ridiculous Buchanan is. That's the only reason why I'm playing it.
A little bit of a challenge, but how from top to bottom, what would you estimate the distance to be at its longest points?
3.5 inches, I guess.
Okay, and then the next page, please, the final page, which would be sub C. Do you see the same designator on the bottom right?
Yes, I do.
That's 716, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Appears to be out of the same evidence envelope, is that right?
That's what's suggested, yes.
And how long would you estimate this item to be?
7.5, 8 inches.
And maybe, what, 3 inches tall? 4?
Yeah, 3.
3. Okay, we can have the lights up here with the court's permission. Again, the last time you were out at the location with very little snow on the ground, you collected certain items of evidence on February 10th, correct?
February 10th was the last time I collected. I said there was still snow on the ground, maybe in piles where it was excavated. There was very little, but there was still snow on the ground.
You indicated that you obviously looked around the area. You talked about the general area. I think you used the word general vicinity, right? When
yes.
You collected your items.
Yes.
General vicinity is as specific as he can get. Because when he was collecting these taillight pieces from the melted snow caps, like he's some big explorer, he didn't bother to note down where they were. We talked about this on Friday, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but didn't write down where they were, didn't put them on a diagram, didn't GPS tag them or anything, nothing. No, nothing. But the point Jackson's making is that, well, a few days later, more taillight pieces were found. Like, these taillight pieces just kept popping up. How interesting is that? In the 70s, we got snow like that. I do remember one winter when we got completely snowed in. I mean, really bad. I think that's the deepest I've ever known. That was bad. What was that? Maybe 77, 78. Maybe 1978. Possibly. Yeah, the winter of 78 and 79. That was really bad. 2011 was quite deep, wasn't it? I think that's the last time we've ever had any significance. No, here anyway. But I digress. I'm just going to let this play for a little bit longer.
You didn't see this, and you didn't see the one before it either, did you?
If I saw any of these items, they would have been collected. We did not excavate anything. We simply allowed the thawing and natural recession of the snow to reveal additional items.
Yeah, natural recession of the polar ice caps revealed these tail-light pieces. No, not even any pics, but couldn't be bothered to get the crime scene person out. Well, your phone's got a camera on it. You know, at the very least you could do would be to photograph the pieces in situ, like where you find them, and put some, and then take a picture with like some kind of landmark or something. That's the very least you could have done, but no, nothing. All right, moving on, because it's frustrating. Right, we're going to go to I can't even read my own timestamps here because I'm so blind. Hold on, I make my text bigger. All right, 236. 236. So we come back from, we got a break, we got a long break. They're in sidebars for ages, but finally we get to the text messages. And again, I'm not going to read the text messages. I just want to play the beginning of it because it was hilarious. Like, Buchanan, he's such a dummy. Such a dummy. He's trying to describe the pictures in these text messages. I was cackling. I spent a lot of time during this trial cackling. Honestly. So Judge Bev reads out the instruction to the jurors, and then he sets off.
Big stack that messages that are going to be marked as the next exhibit. And I have two instructions for you folks. First is, as I've told you before you consider any electronic communication in your deliberations, you must first find that it is more likely true than not that the person who authored or sent or created or transmitted the communication was in fact here, the defendant, or Brian Higgins. If you do not find that it is more likely true than not that Ms. Reed was the person who authored or created or transmitted the electronic communication, or Brian Higgins was the person who authored or created or transmitted the communication, then you may not consider that electronic communication at all in deciding your case. Now, if you do, if it gets past that and you do find that that burden has been met, these messages are not being offered to show the truth of the statement. They're simply to show that this information was in fact provided to the Mass State Police for their investigation. Those are the instructions. All right, with that, Mr. Jackson, go right ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate that.
Yes, I'm going to let the witness have that pack. Oh, he's got one.
All right, this is funny. Right. He's such a dummy. He's such a dummy. He looks bored. Yeah. I think he actually got into it. Like, he put a little bit of inflection, a little bit of emotion in his voice when he was reading them. I think he got into it secretly. I think he was mortified at first. And he was like, why am I here? Why did I choose this life? Please, somebody beam me up. Beam me up, Scotty. Yeah, the Commonwealth isn't calling Proctor, as far as we know. Now, look, I'm wondering whether Brennan now will be forced to call Higgins and Brian Albert because of the Waterfall videos as well, which we're going to talk about at the end.
Oh, you know what, Chrissy? I'll take one back. The one for ID will now be the exhibit, and I'll take the other one.
Of course.
Yeah. Alternate between cackling like a witch and puking in my own mouth a little. I know, it's Brian Higgins. What a slime ball.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant Buchanan, do you have a document in front of you that's been marked as Exhibit 115?
I do.
If you could, starting at the beginning, do those purport to be text messages between Brian Higgins and Karen Reed?
Yes, they are.
Does that printout accurately reflect what you received in electronic form from Brian Higgins during your interview?
Yes.
If you could start at the beginning.
Oh, and I should have mentioned that after Brian Higgins extracted these text messages from his phone, he then destroyed the phone. He took the phone to an army base and threw it away just before the preservation order, as did Brian Albert. Only Brian Albert used a different excuse. His excuse was, oh, well, I upgraded my phone and I lost everything. It's almost like the Stefan Stearns excuse of, oh, I accidentally factory reset my phone. Except for Brian Higgins, it was, oh, I upgraded my phone, which he may well have been due for an upgrade. You know, you get a better contract, blah, blah, blah. But he lost everything. Well, these days, when you get a new phone, things just transfer over, don't they? Yeah, busted the SIM card in half. Listen, why did both of them do that just before the preservation order? They knew that it was coming. This complete lack of investigation of anyone other than Karen Reed. And they've made the evidence fit what they think the crime was. And absolutely no investigation of anybody who was at 34 Fairview that night, even though there is glaring red flags that should have at the very least been investigated, but they weren't. Yeah. Destroyed SIM card. They just got rid of it. Got rid of all the evidence, everything.
And read the...
And look, this was in addition to Brian Albert getting rid of the dog that slept in his room for 7 years and the house that was his childhood home that his parents bought in the 70s, and he's lived there all his life. Oh, after this, they sold up. Unbelievable.
The text string indicating the date of the text, if it's dated, who it's from, who it's to, and the content.
Yes, sir. The text messages begin Wednesday, January 12th at 8:27 p.m. Incoming text message to Brian Higgins' phone from...
January 12th it starts. So 12 days. No, 16 days before they were all at the Waterfall together.
Karen Reed. Hey, Brian, it's the weed whacker. The response is a question mark, followed by a picture of a 6-pack of Smirnoff ice screwdriver in appears to be a package store cooler, followed by a YO response. And that is it for January 12th, Wednesday. Do you want me to continue, sir?
Yes. May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, keep going.
Going back to the Smirnoff container, that was from whom and to whom? For the picture of the Smirnoff.
It appears it was from Brian Higgins to Karen Reed.
Okay. If you could make sure to delineate from whom and to whom each text is
Every time?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, and go ahead and proceed.
Thursday, January 13th, 9:24 a.m. From Karen Reed to Brian Higgins. Did you try those Smirnoff? There is a haha acknowledgement response to that text message by Brian Higgins. The next page, it's the same bubble, but continue on the next page. I will repeat. Did you try those Smirnoff screwdrivers? Question mark. I stopped at the Hilly for one last night. A Bitmoji showing teeth. That is sent from Karen Reed to Brian Higgins.
If you could, and I
Emoji showing teeth.
hate to ask this of you, but if you could tell us who it's from before the content, for instance, from Karen Reed to Brian Higgins content, that would just be a little easier, I think,
Okay.
in flow.
The last one was from Karen Reed. She stated, did you try those Smirnoff? And that she stopped by at the Hilly last night for one.
They're all alcoholics. I mean, they need some kind of intervention. They all do.
From Brian Higgins to Karen Reed, haha, followed by same person. How did you get my digits? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Karen Reed to Brian Higgins, the Melissa and Leto show. Brian Higgins to Karen Reed, ha, ha. Brian Higgins to Karen Reed, I thought you creeped John's phone.
I'm crying here.
Brian Higgins to Karen Reed, ha, ha. Karen Reed to Brian Higgins, no way, with the emoji, X person holding an X in front of them. I was the last person in Greeter, Canton, who didn't have your pound sign, number sign. I think even Carrie has it.
I'm going to see counsel at sidebar for just a minute, please.
All right, so I think Judge Bev realized that this wasn't working because they decided that they weren't going to show the text to the jury. He was just going to read them. So Judge Bev had made an executive decision and said, no, look, we're going to show the texts so that all he has to do is read the content. He doesn't have to describe the emojis and he doesn't have to describe the pictures. Absolutely hilarious. But it went on for hours. So they had lunch, came back, carried on. All right, so let's go to the next timestamp. So 5 hours. I'm going to skip us right the way after lunch and to 5 o'clock. Not 5 o'clock, but 5 hours in.
So would you agree that the text messages show a romantic interest for whatever motivation, a romantic?
And this is just after, right? Text messages are done now. And this is another example of just how slimy Buchanan's being. So I don't know whether he was probably honest here. I don't think Buchanan knows very much about romantic relationships. I'm just going to give it a guess that maybe he's not that popular. So maybe you did have problems deciphering some of this stuff, but I just play a couple of minutes and then we're going to go to the waterfall because this is really interesting. The waterfall stuff, I find it really interesting. And if anybody's watched the latest video by Microdots, you need to go and watch it. It's so good. But anyway, let's just play Shady Mechanic first.
Interest from Brian Higgins toward Ms. Reed.
You have to ask that differently.
In your mind, as you read the text messages, did you determine in your head that there was a romantic interest by Brian Higgins toward Karen Reed?
In my mind, I saw the text messages for what they were, initiated by Karen Reed, and began a text message conversation with Brian Higgins.
And Brian Higgins was responsive to those text messages, correct?
They did communicate back and forth.
He was responsive to the overtures that Ms. Reed made toward him, correct? Suggestions. Let's get together for a drink, come over to my house, I'll come over to your house, things of that nature. Those went back and forth between the two, correct?
Yes, they went back and forth.
And did you determine that there was an interest by Brian Higgins in Karen Reed?
I read that he repeatedly asked her, what's her plan, what's her goal, what's her interest, what's her intent.
Did that show you an interest on his part in her?
I think at one point he said he was confused, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, or what's the term he used? He was unsure what she wanted.
He called her hot.
He did, yes.
Called her witty.
Right from the rip, yes.
He said he wanted to spend time with her.
Spend time, yes. Yeah.
He was interested in going over to her house.
Yes.
He was interested in her possibly coming over to his house.
Yes.
He told her that he thought she was hot, his words, from the jump, correct?
From the jump, yep.
How do you interpret that?
From the jump, I would interpret it as right from the beginning. Maybe the first time they saw each other, laid eyes on each other. I mean,
as a matter of fact, he basically said that, didn't he, in the text message? From the first time I saw you, I thought you were hot.
Yes.
You couldn't believe, right? Brian Higgins has probably not had, you know, a lot of women who are going to be, you know, I don't know, flirt with him, be kind of forward towards him. He maybe thought it was some kind of joke. Maybe he thought she was setting him up. I don't know. But he was definitely interested. And the way this guy's talking, right? I mean, Jackson did really well here to get him to open up about the way that these text messages were clearly intended. Karen Reed, in my opinion, was feeling dejected. She was feeling angry with John. She probably felt that John was maybe not going to be the one for her long term. And she wanted some attention. She wanted to feel attractive. And why she chose Brian Higgins, I've got no idea. But Brian Higgins couldn't believe his luck. Thought she was hot. Thought, why is this hot woman coming on to me? I can't believe it. I can't believe it. But anyway, she did end up going to his house. And I don't think anything happened between them, but she ended up going to his house. And then after that, she just ghosted him. So he was confused. And then on the night of the 28th, when they were in the Waterfall bar, they were all there together. Brian Higgins was there with Brian Albert, Brian Albert's family. We got Karen and John come in, like very late they come in. They're not in the Waterfall that long, maybe like an hour, maybe. And Brian Higgins couldn't believe that Karen was ignoring him. So he texted her, and he texted her, well, ... Was it just well, ... And she ignored him, and he kept checking his phone, to see if she'd replied. And then right at the end, we see something really interesting. So let's go there. 5:32. 5:32.
You did nothing to investigate that.
We had the information that we had. We did not need to get his phone.
All right, that's just about, I've already mentioned that. So the investigation was really rubbish, and they didn't need his phone. It didn't matter. They didn't need his phone, but his phone, he got rid of his phone anyway. So I've already talked about that. All right, let's go to the Waterfall bar here. And I want 5:59. We're going to go right to the end of the night. So Alan Jackson's playing various clips and going right to the end of the night. And I don't know what is with this really poor copy. I don't know whether it's the glare on the screen or whether they've purposefully made this difficult to watch. And I say that because last trial, they inverted the video in the Sally port to hoodwink the jury. So I don't know whether this is just a glare on the screen and the jury are seeing this just fine. I mean, it's not great anyway, it's surveillance video. Or whether this has been lightened to make it harder to see it. But microdot, I'm going to play this little clip here. I'm going to play it on microdots in a minute to show you just how better the quality could be. I think it's a glare. It could well be a glare. It could well be. It might not be intentional. But so Alan Jackson he's really got his teeth into Buchanan here. He really wants Buchanan to look at this and study this. And let's see.
Identify each individual.
Let's play it forward if we can. One more time. At this point, go ahead and pause it. At this point, can you make out any individuals?
Yes.
Okay.
At this point, I can say that looks like Brian Higgins in the middle of the three gentlemen.
What is he wearing?
This guy here.
It looks like a hooded sweatshirt.
Okay. And the person to his, sorry, let's do it from your perspective, the juror's perspective. The person to the left of Brian Higgins.
I believe that's Brian Albert.
And the person to the right of Brian Higgins.
To the right from my perspective?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I believe that's Chris Albert, but I'm not positive. I'm not
Let's go ahead
positive.
and play it.
It is Chris Albert, Brian Albert's brother. And Chris Albert owns the pizza shop that Karen wanted to go to. She wanted to go and get pizza, but then none of the others did. And he doesn't go back to 34 Fairview. But he's intently conversing or having some kind of discussion with Brian Albert.
Stop. Did you see Brian Higgins just do something?
I was not paying attention to his gesture. We have to replay that, please.
Does it appear he's looking a particular?
Now, none of them are ever going to admit what was said. None of them. Like last trial, they had Chris Albert on the stand, Brian Albert, Brian Higgins. None of them are going to tell the truth about this conversation here. But I think Microdots has got it spot on. Absolutely spot on. Like when I heard that, I thought, yes, that's exactly what's going on. Exactly. No, that's Chris Albert. That's Chris Albert. The other brother.
Direction.
He is looking in a particular direction based on that frame, yes.
Is that toward the bar area?
It's in that direction. I don't know exactly where he's looking, whether he's looking at the bar, to the right of the bar. I can't tell from this.
Okay. And John O'Keefe, you indicated earlier that John O'Keefe, that's where you saw him most of the video, toward the bar area, to the right of the bar.
If you scroll to push the screen to the right, I can tell you where Mr. O'Keefe is.
With the court's permission.
Yes.
Do you see Mr. O'Keefe in that group of people?
I cannot make him out. Could you play the video? Maybe he is behind an individual.
Let's go back to with the
So John O'Keefe is at the bar paying the tab.
court's permission. I'd like to go back to the full video, and let's play it from here. Pause it. Could you see what was happening with Brian Higgins?
He was gesturing to someone. I was trying to see Mr. O'Keefe. We were talking about Mr. O'Keefe, so I apologize.
Understood. With the court's permission, could I play the video one more time with it focused on the other side of the bar?
Okay.
Thank you. Last time.
Can you tell me who to focus on, please,
Yes.
so I'm not...
So Brian Higgins is, there seems to be an intense conversation between Brian Higgins and Chris Albert. Chris Albert throws his arms up, like a shrug type thing, and walks off. And then Brian Higgins continues to try to get John O'Keefe's attention while John O'Keefe, is paying the tab. And we know that Brian Higgins was intent on John going back to 34 Fairview. We know this because one of the last texts ever that was sent to John O'Keefe was from Brian Higgins saying, "Hi, are you coming here?" That was when they were in the car on the way there. So Brian Higgins really wanted John O'Keefe to go to 34 Fairview. Why is the question. Now let's play this on Microdots. I need to put this in the description box. I forgot. But please go and watch this. The whole thing. I'm only going to play a little minute of it, and I will put it in the description box for replay viewers once this finishes. Once I go live, but once finished live. But there is the link in the chat. Now, let's play it from maybe there. And he's cleaned it up. It's easier, very clear to see. I mean, he's obviously really zoomed in here, so that's why it's a bit pixelated, but it's much clearer.
Higgins focused like a laser beam on John. And Chris Albert's attention has now shifted directly onto Higgins, appearing to sense what he is about to do. Higgins goes to raise his arm and shout to the victim, but before he can even bring it above his waist, Chris Albert aggressively grabs his forearm, preventing it from happening. The significance of Chris Albert's actions cannot be overstated. They reveal clear prior knowledge, an unmistakable anticipation of hostility directed towards John. There is simply no other valid way to explain how Chris would know what Higgins was about to do before he did it.
I mean, I absolutely agree with this. That it's like Chris Albert is saying, no, don't be stupid. I mean, whether Brian Higgins was saying, I'm gonna sort him out here, you know, I'm gonna, like he was on the verge of kicking off, and Chris Albert was like, no, puts his arm, like holds his arm down. But Brian Higgins continues.
I'm not suggesting anyone intended to kill John, only that there had to have been prior discussion, if not some form of coordinated plan to confront him.
Yeah, I think Brian Higgins wanted John O'Keefe and Karen Reid to go to 34 Fairview so he could confront John. I think he felt belittled by Karen, and I think he felt that John O'Keefe was in his way. I think he's really that childish, and he'd set his sights on Karen, and he thought Karen wanted him, and now Karen has ghosted him, so he's going to blame John. He's going to blame his competitor. And no, I do not believe that they got John to 34 Fairview or intended to get John to 34 Fairview to kill him. I don't think that at all. I think they wanted to confront him. I think Brian Higgins wanted to fight him, and Brian Albert was going to let it happen. And whatever happened, I think, went completely wrong. And I think John O'Keefe's death was not intended. I think it was, but there was some kind of confrontation. Maybe somebody snapped, somebody got, you know, just saw red in that moment. Or it could have been an accident, like John fell down and hit his head on something. You know, it could have hit him and pushed him, and the dog attacked him and he hit his head on something. Could be that simple. It all went wrong, and I think they panicked. The fact that you've got, you know, Brian Higgins and Brian Albert in law enforcement, you've got, you know, their reputations on the line, and they did a bad thing. I think the cover up of it, I think they intended to put him out in the snow near those bushes, so it looked like John was coming home, like going to walk home, and he got hit by a plough. And yeah, the cover up is the conspiracy. The cover up is the thing that, because the Albert family were big shots, like big fish in a little pond, they were able to do it because the Alberts knew just enough people to be able to lay some taillight pieces. I think once they realised that Karen's taillight was cracked, once they realised that Karen was hysterical over it all, I think they thought that she'd be easy bait and they could pin it on her. She'd plead guilty. I think they charged her with second-degree murder on purpose so that she'd plead. And they'd say, well, if you plead guilty, we'll take murder off the table and you'll get done for vehicular homicide, whatever that is, manslaughter by vehicle. And I really think that's what they thought she'd do, that she was very emotional. You know, they could pin it on her and she wouldn't fight back. That none of them expected what they got. None of them expected this. Whether they regret it now, whether if they could turn back time, they'd have done it completely differently. I think they probably would. I think they'd probably have just left it that he got hit by a snowplow, complete accident, and you know it's unfortunate, but that's what I think. That's what I think.
Now, we can operate under the assumption that these three men know something about John's future that we do not. Chris grabs Higgins by the arm, turning him back around to face him directly.
Look, he's really gripping him.
This unexpected
Really
outburst from his brother catches Brian's attention. And Higgins, whipping his head toward Chris, seems just as taken aback by the sudden hostility as we are. Notice that Chris is grasping Higgins' shirt so tightly that you can see tension in the fabric. And as much tension on his face.
It's a proper tense
Chris
moment.
pushes Higgins' arm down to his side. He fixes him with a hard, unflinching stare.
Like he's like, what the F are you doing? What the F am I hearing here? Like, grow up. Don't be stupid. Calm down. It's not worth it. You know, all the things you say to your mate when they're going to do something stupid, when they're seeing red in the heat of the moment, you know they're going to regret it. And if Higgins went to 34 Fairview with that on his mind, I think Higgins is the one that is responsible. I do. I think it's Higgins. And I know that a lot of people think it's Colin Albert. And I thought that. Like, I thought that originally, that it was Colin Albert. But I think it's Brian. And I think it's all about the text messages. I think Brian Albert let it happen. And Brian Albert needs to cover it up because it's his house and his dog attacked him. And it's his dog who bit his arm multiple times. So Brian Albert is the one that's been able to do all this covering up because of his connections. But they've had to do an awful lot to keep this focused on Karen Reid.
Chris releases his grip. Higgins turns his head toward Brian, deferring to his authority and seeking his approval. But Chris steps squarely in front of Higgins and puts both of his hands on him again. Higgins is rattled. Brian raises his palms facing upward, a universal gesture of confusion, questioning Chris's protest. Higgins continues to fix his gaze on John, peering over Chris's right shoulder. Meanwhile, Chris stands in a posture strikingly similar to that of a bouncer stepping in to defuse a confrontation.
Yes, that's exactly
Higgins steps back and shifts his focus again to Chris, prompting Chris to release his grip on Higgins' left arm for the second time. Higgins stares blankly. The two men exchange a few words as Chris gestures towards the exit.
Yeah, he's going, look, just go and leave it. Just go and calm down.
Chris is trying to assert control over the situation. However, both men turn their attention to Brian Albert as he intervenes. Brian challenges Chris's position with his voice and body, causing Chris to throw up his arms in frustration. There's clearly a disagreement between the Albert brothers.
Yeah, so he's like, oh, F you then. Do what you want. I tried. F you. Like, throws his arms up. Like, F you. Like, when he realised that Brian's supporting the other Brian, he's like, F you, and he walks off.
It appears that Chris either disapproved of Higgins confronting John altogether, or he was uncomfortable with him doing it so publicly. I lean towards the latter. Ultimately, however, it is Brian who holds authority and makes the final decisions. Chris is overruled by his older brother. Higgins has the green light and is allowed to continue. Chris submits, but is still clearly on edge. As the brothers settle the matter with a few final words, Higgins presses on, shifting his focus back to John.
Look, so he now starts shouting at John, like, and as he's leaving, he's like gesturing with his arms, as we saw from the court film. He starts gesturing, and we know this was focused on John because, like, what, 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, he texts John, "Are you coming here?" Yeah, Chris is like, he's your friend, you'll deal with him. Like, fuck you then. It has nothing to do with me. You know, he tried. Like, he was like, just calm down, just leave, calm down, sort it out tomorrow when you calm. That kind of thing. But him, he's up for it. He's up for it. Look, if this was explained to the jury, I don't think there's anybody who could be in any doubt what they're doing. But obviously Alan Jackson can't. Alan Jackson can't do it because that that would be objected to, and rightly so. So the jury have got to make this conclusion themselves. But, last year when they had Chris, they had Brian, and they had Brian on the stand, and none of them would talk about what exactly was said during this moment. Because now Chris probably knows. He wasn't at 34th year view, he wasn't there, but he probably knows how hot Brian Higgins was, and probably, whether it's just a suspicion, he probably strongly suspects that John O'Keefe died because of Brian Higgins, not because of Karen Reid. Even if it's an accident, he fell down the basement steps, or I kind of wonder whether Brian Higgins got John O'Keefe in the backyard. I'll still believe that possibly this happened in the backyard. But I mean, Karen says she saw him going in the house, and maybe she did. But it would explain why nobody else who's a little bit more objective, like Julie Nagel and Sarah Levinson, why they didn't see John. That actually Brian Higgins was waiting, and maybe, Brian Higgins bringing Chloe down, as he testified to last year. Brian Higgins brought Chloe down, and he said that it was to let her out in the yard to go and do her business. But maybe they got Chloe out because they thought it would be hard to have this growling and snarling dog. Who knows? Or maybe Brian Higgins brought Chloe down just at the wrong moment. I don't know. But something went badly wrong. Now, whether John went in the house and he took him down the basement and then started on him, maybe, possibly. Or whether it was in the backyard, I don't know. And we will never know unless one of these guys talks. But it's clear, it's absolutely clear that Brian Higgins was hot. He was up for it. And this was all focused on John O'Keefe. And it was all about, he feels that, he feels belittled. He's going to re-exert his, masculinity by confronting his competitor. And I think it's as simple as that. It's male pride that has been severely dented, and he's got it in for John. But once they realise that, Karen's got this cracked tail light, well, all of this hatred that Brian will have had about Karen ghosting him, well, he can direct that all onto Karen now. Why was Julie Nagel so nervous to give an interview if she had nothing to hide? Well, that's true. Maybe she knows now. But maybe they all know. Maybe they all saw John. Maybe they all saw John. But it has occurred to me that maybe some of them in that house didn't see John, because either whatever happened in the backyard, or they took him straight down the basement. And maybe there is some truth in some of them saying that they didn't see John, but maybe all of them did. Maybe all of them did. And because the Alberts are powerful people, big fish in a small pond, they don't want to say. Oh, Jen McCabe definitely knows. Jen McCabe's been involved from the jump. Nicole Albert knows. Jen McCabe knows. Matt McCabe knows. Definitely all of those people know. They've all been involved in this cover-up. They have. They've all been involved. But it's a brilliant video. Go and watch it. I strongly recommend it. Like I said, I will put it in the description box after, but there's the link again if you want to go and watch it now, because that's all really I want to say, honestly. I mean, that was nearly the end of the day. Had a break. So he's coming back. So we've got more of Buchanan and Alan Jackson, and we'll have the redirect, we'll have the recross, and then let's see what Hank Brennan. I'm most looking forward to the accident reconstruction. I mean, really looking forward to that for both sides. I really want to know what the Commonwealth have got in store, because Trooper Paul from last year was absolutely terrible. So at least Hank Brennan's got a better person to explain to us how it's possible that John O'Keefe had the injuries that he had from being sideswiped by a Lexus SUV. I just don't see it. I just can't see it. I cannot see it. That's the reason why she's innocent. She's innocent. She's absolutely innocent, because there's no evidence that her Lexus hit John O'Keefe and killed him. You know, whether she could have been absolutely blind drunk. And that's terrible. She shouldn't have been drinking and driving. I don't like it. They're all alcoholics. They all need an intervention. They just do. They all need an intervention. And Canton is a place I'm just never going to go to. I'm never going to go to. But it is what it is. She's innocent because her vehicle didn't hit John O'Keefe. But I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen to what the Commonwealth expert says. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I'm also interested in the medical stuff. I think the medical stuff's going to be more interesting this year, because they've got the dog expert to explain the injuries. Now, they had a dog expert last year, but I don't think it really hit home. I don't think it really worked. But yeah, all right. So I'm going to go. So we've got an hour and a quarter, a little bit more than that, before day 14 of Karen Reid retrial. Has anybody seen Turtle Boy trying to reverse fast down Fairview Road? I did see that. It's a while ago, though. It is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. When I was out and about last night, if anybody saw my little video that I did, Right, I was walking through the streets of my village, and I'd intended to do this, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago, and I measured out a little plot of grass. It's like a common area, right, in my village, and it's about the same size as the front yard at 34 Fairview. So it's about the same size as, I'll show you. So if you look at kind of this bit here, that little piece of grass is that size. So I stood at my little marker that I've been using, which was the flag, like the lamppost was a flagpole. And then it's just under 70 feet from the flagpole to the front door here. And I thought, what can I see? What can I see on a piece of land that's the same size? And obviously it's completely different, like different lighting, different, like, you know, there was snow on the ground, but only a dusting of snow, only just enough to track a cat at that time. The real snow came down in the morning. So it was very light snow when all this went down. And as they were leaving, there was hardly any snow. And I think standing 70 feet away in the dark, I mean, there are other street lights on this road. Maybe I need to find a plot that doesn't have street lights, like the same size, but doesn't have street. Like, does this road have street lights? Doesn't look like it does. Doesn't look like it does. But is it possible that all of those people who were leaving didn't see him? That was what I was getting at. But while I was doing that, I was walking up and down the street, like putting my right arm next to various cars. If I'm caught on anybody's cameras, they will be really confused about what I was doing. Like, I was walking slowly with my right arm, like dangling, like as if I'm just walking along and this car's going to reverse and hit me. And there's no one around here that's got a Lexus that I can see. There's somebody who's got a Nissan, which I think is about the same size, but I'm good. They always park it in their driveway, so I don't know whether I'm actually going to be able to video myself next to this Nissan without them coming out and wanting to know what I'm doing near their car. So anyway, I just can't see it. I can't work it out in my head. Like reversing back. So she's reversing back 70 feet at 24 miles an hour. She hits him in the right arm at 24 miles an hour, and all it does is break the taillight and give him some scratches. Doesn't break his elbow. Doesn't dislocate his shoulder. No, nothing. And then he happens to land. Oh, I'm not sharing. Oh, sorry. Should have told me earlier. That's all you're seeing. That's all you're seeing. That's all you're seeing. That's about the size of the thing, the piece of land that I was on last night. Like this bit. It's about the same size. But how could he then land? Like, he must have to have done some kind of pirouette in the air to land on his back, on his head. It doesn't make sense. I can't see it. I just can't see it. I just cannot see it. So I'm strongly looking forward to the Commonwealth's expert who may be able to explain to me how it was possible. ARCA, the experts that the FBI employed, say, no, this was not a road traffic collision. It was not. But I'm open. I want to listen to what the Commonwealth have to say, what expert they bring. So there you go. Unless he stumbled over there and fell back. How though? I mean, to fracture his skull, like the back of his head was like caved in, like properly broken. He would have had to have pirouetted, stumbled and fallen at such force that even if the ground's frozen, you'd literally have to fall on the back of your head for it to happen. It just doesn't make sense. The injuries don't make sense. It does not make sense. It doesn't. It really doesn't. And that's why I've always believed that Karen Reid is innocent for that reason. Nothing else matters. If it cannot be proven that she hit John O'Keefe, and there's no evidence that suggests that she did, it's just impossible. You're more likely to be abducted by aliens than the chances of something like this happening, like some freak like occurrence. That everything fell into place. John O'Keefe, like a stuntman, did a pirouette in the air and landed on his head. No. It's much more likely that those injuries came from either a hit to the back of the head with something, like a dumbbell or something, and the dog had a go at his arm, much more likely. Or he was pushed, punched, something, and he fell and he hit his head, fell downstairs, hit his head on something in the back. That's way more likely. Way more likely. Yeah. If he's in the basement, there was a gym down there, could have been hit by a dumbbell. Yeah, somebody just saw red and whacked him. You know, John might have got mouthy. John might have got aggressive. And, you know, it might have said, oh, look, listen, I'm leaving. And he might have been walking away, and Higgins picked up a dumbbell and whacked him over the back of the head, just completely seeing red. It could be something that's way more likely. Look, Occam's razor. It's way more likely, given that Brian Higgins was clearly hot and ready to go in the waterfall. Text John O'Keefe, are you coming here? Hardly knows the guy. I mean, yeah, they're kind of like drinking buddies, but, you know, makes the effort to text. Doesn't text Karen, text him. Earlier in the night, I texted Karen while she was in the same room, texted her like a little boy, well, ... and she ignored him. That's going to have angered him. He's going to have felt demasculated. Is that a word? And he wants to, you know, his male ego, he's burning now. And he wants to exert some kind of control, dominance, whatever. And he takes it out on John, and I don't think they're meant to kill. I really don't think they got him there to kill him. I really don't. But it's way more likely that something like that happened than some freak occurrence where John was hit 24 miles an hour. I mean, like, is Karen some kind of stunt driver? All right, so... Oh, and the other thing that I wanted to mention as well, Brian Higgins lied about the amount of snow on the ground as well. He lied about the amount of snow. I don't think I've got the timestamp, but it was during this cross-examination that when Brian Higgins was leaving, and this is bizarre, that he left this party to go to Canton PD to move some vehicles. In the middle of the night, after he'd been out partying, he suddenly decided that he needed to go to Canton PD to move some vehicles. And when he left, he said he didn't see anyone on the lawn because of a snowbank. How could there have been a snowbank when there was only a dusting of snow? We've heard from the Commonwealth's own meteorologist that there was only a dusting of snow between 12:30 and 1:30, a dusting. Ryan Nagel said you could still see the grass at 12:30. So, you know, a small dusting, not a snowbank. We're not to the point where the snow's drifting. We're not to the point where the plough's been by and started to pile snow up. No. No. Seriously. Seriously. Unbelievable. Occam's razor. And people go, oh, well, Occam's razor's the car. No. It's completely and totally improbable. So improbable. It would have to be like a freak thing that happened. It's just not. He would have had a broken elbow and a dislocated shoulder at the very least if he was hitting the right arm at 24 miles an hour. You're not going to break a taillight 24 miles an hour enough to scratch you up and not break your elbow at that amount of force. Occam's razor is a confrontation that went wrong. Given everything else and everything that happened immediately before, everything that happened immediately after, we have Occam's razor as a confrontation that went wrong. There you go. All right. I really am going this time. Really, really, truly am going this time. So thank you for joining me once again. And I will be back tomorrow to do a recap of day 14. So until then, if you're following the really, really sad, very suspicious case of Lily and Jack Sullivan, I've already posted a video over on MichelleAfterDark. So I'm going to go and check that out. You're very welcome. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Thanks, mods, as always. And enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to listen to the trial sitting outside because it's lovely. All right. Bye, guys.